Hello, welcome to the third in this limited series of training PowerPoints that hopefully folks will find useful. And this one was to be on the OIP process. I worked and looked for a lot of different things, and I found an old favorite of mine from a couple of years ago that I actually used at an EFIF meeting, and it's a training embedded in a kind of quiz. So we're going to go through this, and it's What's My Line? If you're as old as me, you remember that used to be a TV show, game show. And if you're not as old as me, take my word for it, it used to be a game show. So in the meeting, they worked in their groups. They were supposed to determine the answer and write it down. And I literally just pulled this up, and we're going to work through it. I know I need to do something more, but this is my starting point. So anyway, there we go. I'm going to ask you to come up with an answer in your head to this question, true or false, and why. The purpose of the Ohio improvement process is to complete the required documentation for schools and districts in accountability. Give you a second to decide if that is true or false. That is false. When viewed as an organizational strategy, OIP gives districts a template, a framework to focus their actions and their plan and take notes. It brings educators together through collaborative team structures to learn from each other. That was actually its original purpose for the OIP process. It was to be a time when teachers could collaborate and learn together and look at their data and collaborate and try and determine what would work best for their students in their grade, in their subject, in their building. And it turned into something else entirely when they put a form with it. And the idea of the form was always just to provide some structure. Based on all of the research that had been done, the things in the form were things that they knew were helpful in guiding this instruction and this work. But it's if you give a mouse a cookie, if you give a teacher a form, they are going to want to fill it out correctly and completely. And then we had districts, and I was in one, working for a while, that started grading the TBTs, giving them points on how well they filled out their form. So then it really became all about the form, and that was never the point. With the new structure, ODE has tried very hard not to create a form. And that's really frustrated some people because they want to do it right. And the folks I've worked with at ODE are aware of that, and they're not that worried about right as long as it's done. Meaning, teachers are meeting, teachers are doing the work that needs to happen in TBTs and BLTs and DLTs, and they are keeping some kind of a record of their work so they know what happened. The communication goes from TBT to BLT to DLT and from DLT to BLT to TBT, back and forth constantly. So that's the whole purpose behind it. It was supposed to be a time for teachers to learn together. And it's become something else entirely, but we're really trying to get it back to what it needs to be. Our next question, what is the work of TBTs? There are 3 things that TBTs should do. So jot down, I'm going to take a little swig of water. What do you think those are? You can also pause this while you write them down. The answer? There are 3 things. Unpacking the standards. Unpacking the standards means not getting the books out of the box. That's what it was in the old days. Unpacking the standards is digging into them and finding out what is the level of rigor, what's the depth of knowledge of the question, what are they really asking students to do? Are they asking students to write something or to just communicate something? Because that's very different. When we hear tell how something happens in a standard, when teachers read that, we tend to think, oh, they have to write it down. No, they don't. They just have to convey it in some way. So really unpacking and working with those standards and getting to learn them. Develop and use shared formative assessments. In many buildings where you've got more than one teacher at a grade level or a subject, those formative assessments can really help guide instruction in the whole building. So that is another important piece of work. and studying a common instructional practice and determining how it works with their students. Studying means learning about it, teaching each other, practicing it, going into each other's rooms and watching them practice it, looking at data on it. Teachers have to use a strategy 30 to 50 times for it to become part of who they are, to become a, I hate this term, tool in their toolbox that they can use effectively. Districts that want to try a new strategy every month or every 9 weeks, maybe not the best bet. There is nothing wrong with studying and refining and working on a strategy for a semester to a year to get it to where it's really helping kids and we're not just checking the box that we tried a strategy. Linda's on her soapbox. Okay, next question. What is the work of BLTs? You can pause it. I don't need another drink of water. The answer is to improve the performance of the school, that is everyone, to improve the performance of everyone in the school by helping to support teacher-based teams. That is the big work of BLTs, is to be there to support teacher-based teams. Do teams have what they need? Are teams functioning well? Do teams need someone from another TBT that's on the BLT to come in and help them, to provide information? Ultimately, the BLT's job is to make sure school is a good place for everyone. Everyone is students, but it's also adults. So the next question is, of course, what's the work of the DLT? What are DLTs supposed to do? Answer: they improve the performance of the district, everyone in the district, by changing the culture of the school and the district so that learning is the work. The big thing DLTs can do, because you've got that concentration of leaders from across the district, is really look at the culture of our district. What do we do? What is the most important thing? Is the most important thing learning and teaching? Is the most important thing something else? Is the most important thing the football team? Does that take precedence? Which is great, but that's not going to help the vast majority of your kids in their future. Another thing they need to concentrate on is strengthening the TBTs. Sometimes that is through helping the BLTs help the TBTs. Improving the effectiveness of interventions and supports and supporting the principals. That is the work of the DLT. Most do this by looking at some type of data and determining what needs there are, how things need to be changed, who needs to be supported to improve the performance of everyone in the district. Our next question, who should do this work? It's multiple choice. Got a 33 1/3% chance of being right. Whose job is it to look at short cycle assessments to see if an instructional practice had a positive impact? That is the work of the TBT. TBTs, are to look at instructional practices and see if it had a positive impact. They're going to need data to do that of some type. It can be teacher implementation data. It can be student achievement data. It does not need to be Ohio test data or MAP data. MAP data is 3 times a year. You can't do a practice for 1/3 of the year and then realize you've been doing it wrong, it's not helping your kids. Formative short cycles, that's what data can be looked at to determine if a practice is working. Is it doing what it was intended to do? All right. Whose job is it to attend, observe, and coach TBTs? The correct answer is not your SST consultant. Principals and BLT members. Those are the people who should be attending, observing, and coaching TBTs. And it's hard. There are lots of TBTs and most buildings have one principal. BLT members aren't always ready for that task. But ultimately, that's whose job it is. That also helps the principal know everything that's happening in their building. Who should attend, observe, and coach BLTs? Okay, they should be getting easier. DLT members should be doing that work. Superintendent should be going to BLTs to observe and coach the BLT and whoever leads the BLT. It is generally the principal. The internal facilitator should be doing that work. An external facilitator, that's your SST person, if they are accompanied by the DLT member or the superintendent or the internal facilitator. The SST consultants routinely attend BLTs as the only outside the building person there. And while that helps and you're coaching the principal or the facilitator, it's not the most effective because they tend to see us once a month. Somebody who is internal to the district has a lot more pull and a lot more weight and a lot more respect in implementing because they can pop in at any time and see how things are going. Most of us don't have that luxury. Who should be finding out what TBTs need by visiting and looking at overall implementation and achievement data? Who should be doing that work? That would be the BLT. They should be visiting TBTs. BLTs are supposed to be your building leaders, and they should be visiting TBTs other than the one they attend. They should be looking as a BLT at overall implementation and achievement data to determine, is there something the building needs? Is there something that a pocket of the building is doing wonderfully that we need to replicate across the whole entity? Who should analyze data to determine needs? It's kind of a trick question because it's everybody. The DLT should look at district level data. So across the entire district. The BLT is looking at building level data. TBTs are looking at classroom data. And that is for their step one to identify the critical need. I work in one district, have worked in one district, where they stopped looking at data broken down by building at the district level because it was causing that competitiveness to surface. Well, they did worse than us, so we're okay. They look at it as a district overall, and then each building only sees their own data in the BLT. So we're not comparing ourselves to everybody else in the BLT. This is how we did. This is our reality. This is what we need to focus on. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. That's a DLT's problem. We're working on our building. And then TBTs are looking at classroom data to determine what critical needs are. Oh, look, I gave you the answer. Who should research, learn, select, determine continued use of an evidence-based strategy? Again, that's everyone. The DLT is looking at district-wide strategies, and there are districts that implement a strategy district-wide. The BLT is looking at building-wide strategies. Out of the entire district strategy, how is the building implementing that? Are there tweaks and changes? Do they have a different schedule for how they're going to learn it? The TBTs and classroom level look at how they are implementing that strategy on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. But everything needs to align to the district and building plan. In a perfect world, there is a district plan that the buildings feed into, so we're all headed in the same direction. There is an overarching district strategy or strategies, and the buildings maybe refine that, maybe fine-tune it to a focus point for them, and the classrooms even more so. But if someone at the district level decides we're going to work on higher level questioning, then that's what everybody should be doing. They can do other things, obviously, but everybody's headed in the higher level questioning strategy focus. Who designs and updates their plan? Again, just what I said before. The district updates and designs the district plan. The DLT does that. There should be teacher, administration, higher level, central office folks, SST consultants. There should be board members and parents. Most districts aren't ready for that yet. But they're doing the district plan. The building plan fits into the district plan. How's the building going to implement what the district decided to do? TBTs are their instructional plan. What is our day-to-day instructional plan to support the building plan that supports the district plan? Monitor the plan, implementation, and impact. There's a theme, did you notice? The DLT determines if more district or building supports are needed. The BLT determines if more district or building supports are needed. The TBT monitors student mastery based on implementation. So from student mastery, that might go up to the BLT, and they might decide a TBT needed more supports. If the BLT can't provide those, that's when the district gets involved and helps provide those supports. Or the TBT's got it going on. Growth is like crazy. MAP scores are up finally. They share that with the BLT, and the BLT shares it to the DLT. What's going on in that TBT that can be replicated? We're monitoring implementation and impact. Implementing is also where you get into the adult implementation data. The implementation of the strategy is on the adults. How are you going to measure that? They need to have a way to measure it. It can be self-reporting. It can be people popping into each other's rooms to see what they're doing. It can be sharing lesson plans at TBTs. It can be feedback from students. All students can tell you whether a lesson worked for them or not, from the youngest to the oldest. But the implementation is how the adults are implementing what it was agreed they would do. Determine if the implemented strategies had the expected outcomes. Again, that's everyone at their level. You implemented it. Oh, look, I can't spell the word examine. And I've already shared this at least 3 times. Oh, that's nice to know. Determine if the implemented strategies had the expected outcomes at each level. Did it work at the TBT level? Did it work at the building level? Did it work at the district level? If it did, what needs to make it even better? If it didn't, why? Is it because it's a strategy that doesn't work with our kids? Is it because we really didn't implement it like we were supposed to? Teachers are wonderfully notorious at tweaking it to make it work for us. You can't do that with some strategies. You won't get the same results. You might not be comfortable with it. You might think it's not fun, but it works. And students learn and see success from using some. So you just got to stick with it. And you have to be honest about how you implemented, so you've got good data. Who should do the work of planning the PBIS incentive? Some other team at some other time. I have said in more meetings and heard more PBIS incentives planned in more detail than anything classroom instruction-wise. Not saying it's not important, not saying it shouldn't happen. It doesn't belong in a TBT, BLT, or DLT unless the TBT work is finished and that is at the end. Or the BLT work is finished and that is at the end. You got a 2-hour BLT meeting? Sure, tack that on for the last 15 minutes. Not the first 15 minutes, you'll never get anywhere else. Discuss the carry-in next week. Some other team, some other time. I don't think that can fit in anywhere within the scope of OIP. I'll give you PBIS, Mike. The carry-in, not really. And something we've all seen, though not as much as I used to. Discuss how Jack and Jill's parental unit was arrested last night. That is a private conversation. I have been involved in so many of those conversations at TBTs, sitting there, or BLTs, sitting there thinking, I should not be hearing this. I am an outside person. I do not need to hear first and last names of children and the things that have happened to them. It doesn't need to be, so. That is the end of this interesting little piece of whatever it was. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. And like I said, this was shared in an EFIF, and we did it as a game, as a group. But it does have some really nice components. I would also encourage you to look at the OIP one-pagers, and I'm going to link those with this presentation. They give a nice overview, 1 page front and back for each step of the 5-step process, just to kind of help focus things. The big thing to remember is, and I try to remember this when I'm giving feedback, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. Are we getting better conversations? You do not have to look at data every single time, because if you do, you'll never get to discussing strategies and determining strategies' impact. Data doesn't have to be vendor-approved data. It can be a plus minus that smiley face, frowny face students give teachers after a lesson. How did this work for you? Good or bad? It's just data that they can use to help guide things. And we all do this every day. The big thing that OIP really needs is somebody writes down the discussions and the comments and the decisions that are made. So you can refer back to them to keep everybody on the same page, and people who miss the meeting can then go back and look at the notes. I think that is all for this one. I hope you get something out of this. And if you've got questions, please ask me, because, I realize this didn't meet all the needs, but I do think it's a start. Thank you.